Ferrari just did something in Bahrain that no team was prepared for. Not just fastest. Not just impressive. Strategically dangerous. 1 lap. 1 minute 34.273. 4/10 clear of the field. And nearly 200 meters gained on the straight before Red Bull even reached peak speed. 200 meters. That is not a small edge. That is control. But here is the detail nobody showed you. The SF26 achieved that while visibly clipping energy before the end of the straight. Which means this car is already the quickest over 1 lap. And it is still not optimized. Add to that a brand new V-shaped diffuser producing massive downforce. An aggressive hybrid deployment strategy no other team matched. And an active aerodynamic system now under quiet FIA review. This is not just testing pace. This is championship-level potential. Because if Ferrari smooths the torque delivery and fixes the energy mapping before round 1, the gap does not close. It grows. And that possibility is exactly why rival engineers left day 2 looking uncomfortable. Subscribe now. Because what happened in Bahrain was not a headline. It was a warning. Let's break down what actually happened in Sector 1. Because this is where the shock began. When Charles Leclerc crossed the line with that 1 minute 34.273, the lap did not look dramatic on television. It looked clean. Controlled. Almost normal. But the GPS traces told a completely different story. The SF26 did not build speed gradually. It surged. The acceleration phase out of the final corner was noticeably more aggressive than Red Bull and McLaren. Ferrari released electrical deployment earlier. Harder. More decisively. The car reached maximum velocity almost 200 meters before its closest rival. 200 meters. That is not refinement. That is a calculated choice. Ferrari is front-loading energy. They are choosing to dominate the first half of the straight. And that matters more than most fans realize. Because in Formula 1, whoever controls the first half of the straight controls the braking zone. And whoever controls the braking zone controls the fight. Over a single qualifying lap, that strategy is devastating. You create separation instantly. You force everyone else into reaction mode. But here is the detail no broadcast graphic showed you. After that violent surge, the Ferrari begins to taper. The hybrid assistance fades slightly earlier than its rivals. Energy clipping becomes visible before the breaking point. Which means this performance is aggressive. Extremely aggressive. Ferrari is extracting peak output at the cost of sustained deployment. And that creates a fascinating tension. Because over 1 lap, it is lethal. Over a race distance, it is fragile. Now imagine if that clipping is mainly software related. If the torque mapping can be smoothed. If the deployment timing can be extended without overheating the battery. Suddenly that early straight dominance remains? And the late straight weakness disappears. That is why rival engineers were not dismissing Ferrari's data. They were studying it. Because this is not a slow car finding time. This is a fast car operating near its ceiling. And when a car shows this level of raw pace before being fully refined, the entire grid pays attention. Block 1 was the lap time. Block 2 reveals why the long-run data made the story even more intense. Now let's talk about the long runs. Because this is where the narrative becomes uncomfortable. Lewis Hamilton took over the car in the afternoon. Higher fuel load. Hotter track conditions. A proper race simulation program. And immediately, the data began telling a different story. The raw pace was still there. But the rhythm was not. Out of slower corners, the torque delivery felt aggressive. Almost abrupt. The rear tires had to absorb a sudden hit of electrical power. Then, halfway down the straight, that surge began to fade. Not dramatically. But enough to shift braking references. Lap after lap. That inconsistency forces adaptation. And adaptation over a race distance increases tire degradation. Here is where things get serious. The hybrid system appears to be draining energy very quickly when deployed at maximum attack. That explains the explosive Sector 1 advantage. But it also explains why energy clipping becomes more visible on longer stints. Over 1 lap, you can ignore it. Over 50 laps, you cannot. If Ferrari must lift and coast to preserve battery life, they become vulnerable at the end of straights. And in modern Formula 1, vulnerability is punished immediately. But here is the detail most people missed. This does not look like a hardware limitation. It looks like mapping, software calibration, torque smoothing, which means it is fixable. And that is exactly why rival teams are uneasy. Because if the issue were structural, it would take months to resolve. If it is software related, it could be optimized before the first race. Now add another layer. The SF26 operates within a narrow aerodynamic window. When ride height is perfect, the V-shaped diffuser produces enormous downforce. The car feels planted, precise, But when crosswinds hit, or when the car rides a curb aggressively, airflow can stall briefly. Rear grip drops suddenly. Over one qualifying lap, that risk is manageable. Over a race stint, it increases pressure on the driver and the tires. This is not a slow car. It is a sensitive one. And sensitivity combined with aggressive hybrid deployment creates volatility. Yet, despite those concerns, the underlying pace remains undeniable. The SF26 might currently have the highest performance ceiling on the grid. If Ferrari smooths the torque delivery, if they extend deployment slightly deeper into the straight, if they widen the aerodynamic operating window just enough, then the weaknesses shrink rapidly, and the qualifying dominance remains intact. That is why Day 2 did not create laughter in the paddock. It created silence. Because every team understands the same thing. Ferrari is already this fast, and they are not finished refining the car. Now we arrive at the part almost nobody talked about on broadcast coverage. The internal tension. Because what makes the SF26 fascinating, also makes it complicated. This car does not behave the same way for both drivers. And that matters more than lap time. Charles Leclerc naturally extracts performance from a sharp front end and a lively rear. He attacks corner entry. He rotates the car aggressively. He is comfortable operating close to instability. On low fuel, with maximum deployment, that style unlocks serious pace. Sector 1 and Sector 3 clearly reflect that strength. Heavy braking zones. Strong traction phases. That is where he dominates. But Lewis Hamilton approaches speed differently. He prefers a calmer platform. A progressive weight transfer. Confidence through consistency. And the data shows something very revealing. Hamilton appeared stronger through the flowing middle sector, managing direction changes with smoother inputs, which tells us the car has potential in multiple areas, but not in a single, unified configuration yet. No one has combined the best of both styles into one complete race simulation. That is the hidden complexity. Every setup change to stabilize the rear slightly reduces the rotation that makes the car explosive. Every adjustment to smooth torque delivery slightly softens the aggression that created the headline lap. Ferrari is balancing two philosophies inside one machine, and development direction becomes critical. Do they lean toward qualifying dominance, or toward race stability? Do they widen the aerodynamic window, or maximize peak downforce when conditions are perfect? Add to this the quiet scrutiny from the FIA. Front wing behavior, floor edge flexibility, active aerodynamic interpretation in high-speed corners. If any part of that system requires modification, the balance shifts again. And remember, this car already lives on a narrow operating window. Remove even a fraction of stability, and the sensitivity increases. But if the system is cleared, if the hybrid mapping is refined, if the torque curve is smoothed without sacrificing peak output, then the SF26 transforms from volatile to dominant. This is why teams left Day 2 unsettled. They did not see a finished product. They saw a car operating near its ceiling, with clear room for refinement. And in Formula 1, the most dangerous competitor is not the one that looks comfortable. It is the one that looks this fast, while still evolving. And now we reach the moment that could define how this entire story unfolds. Day 3. Because Day 2 revealed speed, Day 3 will reveal truth. Testing headlines are built on single laps. Championship campaigns are built on race simulations. Ferrari ends the second day with the fastest time, but also with the most complex data set on the grid. And every team knows what comes next. A full Grand Prix distance simulation. Battery temperatures monitored constantly. Rear tire were tracked lap after lap. Hybrid deployment mapped corner by corner. This is where illusions disappear. If the SF26 completes a race simulation without excessive lift and coast, without aggressive rear degradation, without visible energy clipping late in stints, then the narrative shifts immediately. From curiosity to fear. Because that would mean the weaknesses are manageable, and the strengths are real. But if the clipping persists over long runs, if torque spikes continue stressing the rear tires, if crosswinds expose the narrow aerodynamic window, then Ferrari becomes something else entirely. Blisteringly fast on Saturday, fragile on Sunday. And here is why that distinction matters. Ferrari does not need perfection right now. They need proof of scalability. Proof that this concept can evolve quickly. The SF26 already shows pole position pace. It already shows exceptional slow corner traction thanks to its airflow management and S-duct integration. It already shows a diffuser capable of producing massive downforce when conditions align. And it clearly shows a hybrid system willing to deploy aggressively enough to shock the grid. Those are championship ingredients. The question is whether they can combine them without compromise. Because at the moment, everything feels on the edge. The aero balance is sharp. The energy deployment is intense. The operating window is narrow. And two elite drivers are asking for slightly different refinements. This is a high-ceiling machine. And high-ceiling machines are dangerous. They either collapse under their own complexity, or they dominate once refined. That is why rival engineers did not leave Bahrain relaxed. They left aware that Ferrari might have built the fastest foundation on the grid, and aware that if even half of the current weaknesses are resolved through software and setup refinement, the gap could expand very quickly. Day 2 was not about perfection. It was about potential. And in Formula 1, potential is the most unsettling signal of all. Because perfection can plateau, but potential can grow into dominance.